I'm standing alone in a crowded room and we're not speaking. And I'm dying to know, is it killing you like it's killing me? Yeah. I don't know what to say since a twist of fate when it all broke down. And the story of us looks a lot like a tragedy now. At certain points in the discussion, I expressed my understanding that other matters of spiritual nature were likewise the responsibility of the body. I could not personally harmonize the existing monarchical arrangement with Jesus' statement that all you are brothers and your leader is one, the Christ, and that the rulers of the nations lorded over them and great men wield authority over them. But this is not the way among you. Not the way among you! People, what church do I belong to? I belong to the church that Jesus recommended. I've tested my quips with actual Christians and they work. So I'm just giving you a bunch of bullshit, but my bullshit works. I belong to the church that Jesus recommended. I believe stuff that's true, because Jesus recommended that. Christian tested responses that cover my ass properly, because I'm correct. I am correct. In each case of my doing so, however, the President took the remarks very personally, speaking at great length, his voice tense and forceful, saying, evidently some were not satisfied with the way he was handling his job. He would go into great detail, and part of the reason I'm going to the art thing is that that's the kind of theme in, like, the predominant theme. You know it's not the norm, said Christina Aguilera, as she danced around with the bondage theme and the colors of good, evil, and Jesus' blood, and, etc. You know it's not the norm. I'm in rare form. He would go into great detail as to the work, few of those finding, right? He would go into great detail as to the work he was performing and then would say, now apparently some don't want me to handle things anymore. My feelers are hurt. You're hurting my feelers. And now, and that perhaps you should bring it all down here and turn it over to Ray France and let him handle it. I found it, can you see how this guy got fired? Or how he got assassinated? I found it hard to believe that he could so totally miss the essential points of my comments. I was expressing myself in favor of a body arrangement, not in favor of transferal of authority from one individual administrator to another individual administrator. Each time I would explain this to him, making plain that what was said was never meant as any kind of personal attack, I did not feel that any one individual should take on the responsibilities under discussion, but rather my understanding from the Bible and from the Watchtower was that the matters for a body of persons to deal with. I said again and again, if it were a matter of one person handling everything, then he would be my choice. And I felt he had simply been doing what he felt he should do, and what had always done in the past. I had no complaint about his doing so. This did not seem to make any impression, however, and realizing that anything I said along this line would simply provoke anger, after a few attempts I gave up. On these occasions, the remainder of the body remained sat, observed, and said nothing. What happened a few years later, therefore, came as a surprise. Nothing further developed until the year 1975, where further nothing developed in 1975. But consider now what the organization's 1993 history book, Jehovah's Witnesses, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom, relates as to what took place. An event described as one of the most significant organizational readjustments in the modern-day history of Jehovah's Witnesses. On pages 108 and 109 we read, this is actual text from the Proclaimer's book. Organizational readjustments. By 1976, Brother Noor had worked diligently as president of the Watchtower Society for over 3 decades. He had traveled the globe many times over, visiting and encouraging missionaries, teaching and instructing branch office personnel. He was privileged to see the number of active witnesses increase from 117,209 in 1942 to 2,248,390 in 1976. But by the summer of 1976, 71-year-old N.H. Noor had noticed that he had a tendency to bump into things. Subsequent tests indicated he was suffering from an inoperable brain tumor. He struggled. So a lot of your doctrine was made by a guy with a broken brain. He struggled. Sorry to speak ill of the dead, but he struggled to continue to carry a workload for some months, but his physical prognosis was poor. Would his failing health impede forward movement of the work? Enlargement of the governing body had already begun in 1971. During 1975, there were 17 members. Throughout much of that year, the governing body had given serious and prayerful consideration to how they could best care for all that is involved in the global preaching and teaching work outlined in God's work for our day, Matthew 28:19-20. On December 4th, 1975, the governing body had unanimously approved one of the most significant organizational readjustments in modern-day history of Jehovah's Witnesses. Starting in January 1st, 1976, all of the activities of the Watchtower Society and of the congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses around the earth had been brought under supervision of 6 administrative committees of the governing body. In harmony with the arrangements on February 1st, 1976, changes had been put into effect in all branch offices of the society around the earth. No longer was each branch supervised by one branch overseer, but 3 or more mature men served as a branch committee, with 1 member serving as the permanent coordinator. After the committees had been operating for some months, the governing body observed it has proved beneficial to have a number of brothers taking counsel together to consider the interests of the kingdom work. Beneficial! Yay! The book thus leads the reader to believe that the failing health of the society's 3rd president, Nathan Noren, in late 1975, was somehow involved in this major event in the organization's history. Was perhaps a motivating reason for it. All the men who were on the governing body at the time know that this picture is not true. Nor's health problem in reality became evident after the issue had arisen, leading to the change, and hence was purely coincidental. It neither gave rise to the issue nor was it a factor in the governing body discussions and decisions. There is a clear lack of candor in the picture presented. What then did happen? In 1975, 2 Bethel elders, Malcolm Allen, a senior member of a service department, and Robert Lang, the assistant Bethel home overseer, wrote letters to the governing body expressing concern over certain conditions prevalent within the headquarters staff, specifically referring to an atmosphere of fear generated by those having oversight and growing feeling of discouragement and resultant discontent. At the time, anyone applying for service at headquarters, Bethel service, had to agree to stay a minimum of 4 years, just like the Army. Most of the applicants were young men, 19 and 20 years of age. 4 years equaled 1/5 of the life they had thus far lived. When at the meal tables, I often asked the person next to me, "How long have you been here?" In 10 years I had by now spent at headquarters, I had never heard one of these young men respond by saying in round figures, about a year, about 2 years. Invariably the answer was 1 and 7, 2 and 5, 3 and 1, and so forth. And always the year or years and the exact number of months. I could not help but think that of the way men serving a prison sentence often follow a simple practice of marking off time. I've heard Bethel isn't a lot of fun. Generally, it was difficult to get these young men to express themselves about their service at headquarters. As I learned from friends who worked closely with them, they were unwilling to say much in open ways, since they feared that anything they said that was not positive would cause them to be classed as what was popularly called a BA, or someone with a bad attitude, or an SP, a suppressive person. By the time you're making acronyms for your labels for people, you're getting closer to a Scientologist. You're an SP. Many felt like cogs in a machine, viewed as workers but not as persons. Job insecurity resulted from knowing that they could be shifted at any time to another work assignment without any previous discussion, and often with no explanation for the change made. Management employee lines were clearly drawn and carefully maintained. Got to keep a division between the officers and the men, so they don't get too attached to each other, because sometimes the officers need to force the men to go get killed or whatever. It's like the Marine Corps. Even more disciplined than the Army. It's a good idea. It's a really bad idea to get to know your officers, because you'll realize they're retarded. And then you'll realize that they're in charge of your life, or their decisions will determine whether you live or die. The Marine Corps has it right. Don't let the men know their officers. It's very disturbing to realize that your leadership is retarded. Not all of them, but most of them. The monthly allowance of $14. Like, I wish I hadn't known most. Sorry guys. There's a few real good ones, but it's usually kind of a scary thing to realize that your officers don't really know what they're doing. The monthly allowance of $14 often barely covered, in some cases was less than, their transportation costs going to and from Kingdom Hall meetings. Those whose family or friends were more affluent had no problems as they received outside assistance, but others rarely could afford anything beyond bare necessities. Those from more distant points, particularly those from the western states, might find it virtually impossible to travel and spend vacations with their families, particularly if they came from a poor family. Yet these were regularly hearing greetings passed on to the Bethel family from the members of the governing body, and others as they traveled around the country into other parts of the world giving talks. They saw the corporation officers now driving new Oldsmobiles bought by the society and serviced and cleaned by workers like themselves. Their work schedule then consisting of 8 hours and 40 minutes each day, 8 hours and 40 minutes, and 4 hours on Saturday morning. So I can say, well, you're not going out in service, so you might as well be in service to us, bitches. Combined with it, there's been lots of, one of the things society's gotten burned on is, having long-term employees without having retirement benefits, that type of thing. Other countries have gotten in trouble for that. They've had court decisions saying that their employment practices aren't acceptable. Scientology has the same situation. Slave labor, basically. Complying with attendance of meetings 3 times a week, plus weekly witnessing activities, seem many to make their lives very cramped, routine, and tiring. But they knew that to lessen up any of these areas would undoubtedly put them in the SP class. Oh, I'm sorry, BA, bad attitude class. They're SPs, if you don't like it. And result in their being called to a meeting designed to correct their attitude. So you're volunteering your time and you have a bad attitude about giving us your time for free. Alright, motherfucker. We're gonna have a talk about this. We don't like the attitude with which you're giving us your time for free, bastards. Who do you think you are? Not good enough for you, huh? You need to give us your time for free and have a good attitude about it, or we'll fucking kill you. The letters by the 2 Bethel elders touched on these. We'll send Jehu after you. You want Jehu up your ass? Alright, better smile. The beatings will continue until morale improves. The letters by 2 Bethel elders touch on the areas but without going into detail. The president again seemed to feel, unfortunately, this constituted criticism of his administration. He expressed himself to the governing body as wanting a hearing to be held on the matter on April 2nd, 1975, this was done. A number of Bethel elders spoke and many of the earlier mentioned specifics were there aired. Those speaking did not indulge in personalities and made no demands, but they stressed the need for more consideration of the individual, for brotherly communication, and the benefit of letting those close to problems share in the decisions and solutions. As the assistant Bethel home overseer, Robert Lang, put it, we seem more concerned about production than people. The staff doctor, Dr. Dixon, related that he frequently received visits from married couples discussing distress due to the inability of the wives to cope with the pressures and keep up with the demanding schedule, many of the women breaking into tears when talking to him. A week later, April 9th, the official minutes of the governing body session stated, comments were made on the relationship of the governing body and the corporations and what was published in the Watchtower December 15, 1971. It was agreed that a committee of 5 made up of L.K. Greenlees, A.D. Schroeder, R.V. Franz, D. Sidlick, and J.C. Booth go into matters concerning this subject, the duties of the officers in the corporation, and related matters take into considerations the thoughts of N.H. Nor, F.W. Franz, G. Suter, who are officers of the 2 societies, and then bring recommendations. The whole idea is to strengthen the unity of the organization. At a session 3 weeks later, April 30th, President Nor surprised us by making a motion and thenceforth all matters be decided by a 2/3 vote of the active membership, which by then numbered 17. Following this, the official minutes of the session relates, L.K. Greenlees then began his report from the Committee of 5 on Brother Nor's request to tell him what he should do. The committee considered the Watchtower of December 15, 1971, paragraph 29, very carefully, also page 760. The committee feels that today the governing body should be directing the corporations, not the other way around. The corporation should recognize the governing body of 17 members has a responsibility to administer the work of the congregations throughout the world. There has been a delay of putting the arrangement into effect at Bethel as compared to the congregations. There has been confusion. We do not want a dual organization. There followed a lengthy discussion of questions relating to the governing body and corporations and to the president, with comments by all members present. At the close of the day, a motion was proposed by N.H. Nor, followed by a comment by E.C. Chitty. L.K. Greenlees also presented a motion. It was agreed that 3 should be Xeroxed and copies given to all members and meet again the next day at 8 a.m. There would be a time to pray over the matter, which is so important. The Xerox motions referred to read as follows. N.H. Nor, I move the governing body take over responsibility of looking after the work directed by the Charter of Pennsylvania Corporation and assume the responsibility set out in the Charter of the Pennsylvania Corporation and all other corporations throughout the world used by Jehovah's Witnesses. Alright, we're half down the page on page 86.